Welcome to this session of Burning Questions Answered. My name is Anelle Burger. I'm the spokesperson for Cape Home Educators, and I have a panel of seasoned home educators who will answer the question. They consist of Bouwe van der Eems, Shirley Erwee, Chirani Meyer, Jacs, Lemmer, and Peter Reynolds. Bouwe, will you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a homeschooling father, so we've homeschooled all our 5 children, and they are all now finished with their school education and busy with studies and working. So we started homeschooling in 2000, and yeah, now we're done. So I'm also involved in the Pestalozzi Trust, where we protect the rights of homeschooling families.
Great. Shirley?
I'm a homeschooling mum of 6 children. 2 of my children have completed their grade 12 qualification, and the others are still busy being homeschooled. And I'm also a homeschool consultant and curriculum provider of various products.
Welcome. Chirani?
I'm a homeschool mom also. I have 4 children. 2 of them have just recently finished their homeschooling process, and I have my 3rd one is busy doing it last year as well, and then I have a little one who's 12. So yes, that's me.
Good. Jacs?
Debbie and I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls that we've been homeschooling. Our 2 boys did spend some time in public school for a bit there, and our oldest daughter spent only time in pre-primary, and then our youngest daughter never attended public school. The first 3 are already out of school, with my oldest daughter 3rd year music studies at University of Pretoria. I'm also a member of the Pestalozzi Trust, and I'm also the chairman of the Gauteng Association for Homeschooling.
Great. And last but not least, Peter.
Yes, I'm Peter Reynolds. I've been homeschooling for just over a year now. My wife, Luzvi, is in fact the brains of the outfit. We have a son who's 8 and a daughter who's 6. Yeah, and my wife also leads a study group among homeschoolers in our area on the East Rand.
Good. Okay, well, our first question. Recent articles in the media proclaim that home education families should align themselves with the requirement of the BELA Bill. Is this true? Should home educators act in accordance with the BELA Bill?
Yes, it's Bouwe here. The answer is no, because a bill is proposed legislation. You cannot align yourself with something it's proposed. We need to align ourselves with the law. And a bill will only become law once it's gone through Parliament and it's been signed by the President. Only then do we have to align ourselves with it. And currently, the BELA Bill is still being reviewed by the Department of Basic Education. It hasn't been submitted even to Parliament. And while it's in Parliament, many things can happen to the BELA Bill. And we've got no idea what the outcome of that process can be. But even if it becomes law, and there are unconstitutional provisions in that law, then those provisions are not legal and can be challenged in court and set aside by courts. So parents should stick to the current law. That means to do what's in the best interest of their children. And when BELA Bill has become a law and is signed by the President, then we can see what needs to change, how parents should align themselves with something that is law. So the answer is plainly no.
Good. Next question. A new policy on home education was promulgated in November 2018. Why are home educators upset by this new policy?
From my side, from Gauteng, From the Gauteng Association of Homeschooling, there are a number of reasons why we are upset about this bill. I suppose one of the first reasons was that the process for comment was, in our opinion, grossly unfair. The time that was allowed for comment was extremely short to start with, and then secondly, the time that was chosen to put this out for comment was during October, when it was exam time, test time, a time when homeschooling parents were extremely busy, busy with end-of-year exams, busy with preparation for end-of-year exams, that kind of thing. And then to expect people to suddenly stop what you're busy with, oddly enough, the department should know that it's not the appropriate time to put this out for comment, because people are actually busy to do what is important, that is educating children, getting them prepared for the next year. To then put it out within an extremely unfair notice period is one of the most important reasons why we are more than unhappy. And then to see afterwards that the comments that we gave in that short period of time, because I believe that despite the very unfair notice period, we still managed to give valuable and comprehensive feedback on this bill. And then to see in the end that virtually none of those comments were actually in the end incorporated in the final draft. That's just, it's just a travesty of justice in our opinion.
Shirley, do you want to add something?
I have to say, parents feel that the policy violates many of their rights and their children's rights. And it discriminates against homeschooling parents because, for example, a homeschooling parent has to now apply to exercise the right to choose home education. So it's not a right, they don't have that right. Whereas parents who elect to send them to school system, they don't have to apply to prove that that's in their child's best interests. And in fact, in many cases, it's not in the child's best interest. It's just considered the norm in our society against home educating parents.
Now, to educate a child is an enormous responsibility. Can parents really do it themselves, even when they did not finish school or hold a tertiary qualification? Chirani?
Most definitely. I recently read a study done by Anelle Meyer, where she studied the relationship between parents and teachers for 20 years. And she found out that the better the relationship between the child and the teacher, the better the child is expected to achieve. And she found 3 key elements that if a teacher exhibits these 3 elements towards a child, the child will excel. And the 3 elements were warmth, empathy, and the ability to give time. Now, I think a parent will tick all 3 of those boxes, and they fit the criteria to be excellent teachers. So their background in education should have no bearing on their ability to be able to teach their own children.
But should you not know all the content of the subject?
Well, if you've had a basic education and you can read and you have access to the internet, you have no excuse, because we live in an information age and the technology has made it possible to have this information at your fingertips. And even if you do still struggle with certain subjects, there are tutors, there are extra classes, there are uncles and grandpas and friends, and we have so many different avenues we can explore to help our children where we fall short.
Now, there are a number of home education service providers who offer a boxed curriculum or a complete package in a very structured format. What are the main reasons for parents deciding to use a service provider?
I think you're probably referring to a full service provider. So a service provider that supplies all the subjects and does everything. So I think it's a question of parents it's new to them. They don't know what to do. The only thing that they know is school. So they do with what they're familiar with, namely a curriculum that looks like a school curriculum, and they start with that. So the trend is that parents usually start with a full service curriculum, and then as they gain more confidence, they will start mixing and matching and going towards an eclectic approach, and then some of them then become totally informal and go for unschooling. So I think it's the initial uncertainty and lack of confidence that makes parents choose a formal school curriculum initially.
Yeah, if I may add to that, I couldn't agree more with Bouwe in that respect. Most people, in my opinion and experience, that embark on this route of homeschooling, or in fact probably none of the people embark on it did a degree or a course or training in terms of homeschooling. You get to a point for various reasons that you realize that it's necessary to home educate your child, and then you have to find a baseline or a point of departure, and inevitably people will migrate to something that is familiar or that they're used to, and then as time goes by, when you realize that there's far more involved in educating your child at home than just a curriculum, then people tend to diversify or to broaden the process.
Peter, the BELA Bill proposes yearly assessments to be carried out by a competent assessor and the results to be submitted to the head of department. The policy on home education expects parents to submit these assessments at the end of each phase. Now, according to the Department of Basic Education, this is to ensure that the education the child receives is of the right standard and in line with the child's development. Why do home educators oppose this proposed regulation?
We oppose this regulation because there's really no way that the Department of Education can assess our uniquely tailored and configured curriculums, as it were, for our children, unless, of course, they enforce their own curriculum, which is CAPS at Home, which isn't even really a curriculum. It's really a teacher management system. And in any way that this is implemented by the Department of Education, it's going to be an unfair assessment on the child, and it's not going to be an accurate reflection of what the children have learnt or the capabilities that the children or the learners at home have acquired over that period of time. So yeah, we don't think it's going to work. We think it's going to be a complete gratuitous waste of taxpayers' money, and also it's unnecessary regulation that's not going to achieve what it's just going to interfere in the homeschooling schedule that parents and children are working towards.
Chirani, would you like to add something?
Yes, I think I agree with what Peter said, and many parents have chosen not to go the CAPS route because they found that their children failed dismally with this system because the system failed the child, I should rather say. And they've chosen different curriculum that they can tailor-make their child's learning styles, and they can help their child to achieve better with a different curriculum. Now, if they get assessed, they will be assessed according to the CAPS curriculum. And that would not be fair to a child who has not been following the curriculum. And there's no alternative provided for these parents. And another problem that parents have with the CAPS curriculum is that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development ranked South Africa 75th out of 76 countries as the worst according to our education system. So our standard is incredibly low, and for a parent to act in the best interest of the child, it is only rational that they would choose a curriculum of a better standard for them. So this assessment would not work for homeschooling parents at all.
Okay, we've got Shirley back, so I'm going to ask her the question again. Why do many home educators choose to not use a full service package? And is a structured approach the most effective means of educating a child?
Once parents realize that they can give their children a customized education, then they discover that a full service curriculum is far too prescriptive. It's like a straitjacket that you're trying to put on somebody, because it's rigid and you have to follow what is prescribed. Whereas if you have a more eclectic approach or delight-directed approach, parents are free to pick and choose the curriculum that focuses on a way of learning that suits the child, on topics that are interesting to the child, and it makes learning far more enjoyable for both the parent and the child. And of course, if there's any problem, parents can just change curriculum so much quicker than an entire school system can, where it takes years for them to do that. So, you know, people like the fact that they're more in control and they can mix and match different products. And there's an amazing choice of really top quality products on the market. And so that's what people do. They choose what they think is best for their child, and they can even break away from traditional school subjects and add in other topics and subjects that are not offered by schools.
Anyone else?
If I may pose a question there, there's been a lot of discussion in the media of late about the fourth and the fifth industrial revolutions. And as we know, in this explosion of information and the information age, things that are the norm today, professions that exist today won't exist in 5 or 10 years anymore. So the rate of change is so rapid that one wonders how a fixed curriculum like CAPS or whatever other curriculum you follow, how that could ever keep up with this rapid changing environment. That is the reality that we live in. So it's just become untenable. Parents are concerned. We want our children to be prepared for the future, and we just don't see how the traditional way of doing things can keep up. And then if you take the earlier statistics that we heard, number 71 out of 76 in terms of ranking, if that is how low we rank, how can we possibly allege that we can keep up with the changes in the environment that we find ourselves in? We as parents just care too much for our children's future.
Jacs, I just want to pick up on that. It may take a Department of Education a couple of years to design and develop a complete curriculum.
Yes.
Moreover, if you consider that what we are trying to achieve, and a lot of home educators have looked, how do I prepare my children for an uncertain future where we don't know what the economy is going to look like by the time they get to working age? In the case of my son, probably about 10 years or more. There's no ways we can see that future right now, the rate at which change is happening with the fourth industrial revolution. And the only way we can prepare them for that is to help them to be self-directed in their learning and to be able to learn new skills rapidly as is required, as the marketplace or the technology world out there requires them.
Those are such important points. It's just unthinkable that you can take somebody through a formal process that takes years. When the rate of change is months at the situation where we're finding ourselves today.
Correct.
Okay. In order to register for home education, parents must satisfy the Department of Basic Education that this will be in the best interest of the child. Now, who is best equipped to decide what is in the best interest of the child? Bouwe?
A child is a unique individual being, so every child is different. So it's only the parent that intimately knows the strengths and the weaknesses of the child. Only the parents know what's in the best interest of the child. And it's basically irrational to expect that a parent must try to convince an official that doesn't know the child at all that this is in the best interest of the child. So a parent will have to persuade an official that this curriculum or this educational approach that the education department has never heard of and doesn't know at all is in the best interest of this individual child that the Department of Education also doesn't know at all. So it's unreasonable to require parents to convince or to satisfy the department official that it's in the best interest of the child. The department will have to accept that when parents decide that it's in the best interest of the child, that they do that. Only when there's evidence that it's not the case, then one can interfere and challenge the decision of the parents through the court system.
Yes, yeah.
Bouwe, if I may add to that, in a healthy home, there are actually two parents, and two parents that perceive their children or observe their children from two different perspectives. Now, I do grant that not every home has two parents or blessed with two parents, but let's look at this from the perspective of a curriculum and from the perspective of government. Government bases its ideals and its approach on an ideal world or ideal scenario. So I think the scenario where there's an ideal home with two parents should apply in this case. You've got two parents that live with the children from the day that they are conceived through the entire process of pregnancy, and then when they are born. Myself as a father could see the characteristics of my sons when they were still unborn. When I drove with my wife one day, and she was sitting in a car in a position that one of my boys didn't like, the boy gave her a kick until she sat in the way that they wanted her to sit. So it's a process. You live with your child from the day of conception. You get to know your child. You understand the differences in character, in nature of that child. And there are two of you. And every day when the day is over and your wife had a difficult day with the kids when you weren't there, or vice versa, you discuss it in the evening. You discuss the problems you had, the challenges you had, and the way kids differ. And then because family expands to grandparents and uncles and cousins and everybody, invariably the nature of the child is discussed. And you compare, we all know that scenario. You grow up when you hear your parents talking about you as a person. Oh, you've got the same personality as that uncle or your grandfather or that person. So the community around the child understands the child and the history of that child. In a schooling system where you have teachers, there is no chance that same insight in a child ever could exist. So how can you then allege that officials can understand what is the best or in the best interest of that child? That's just ludicrous.
A question that often pops up is, what about socialization? In a classroom setting, the learners can work collaboratively, practice public speaking, and debate topics. And during break, they can play with a large group of children on a big playground. Now, at school, they practice team sports. Are home-educated learners isolated and deprived of these and other opportunities? Chirani?
Definitely not.
Okay, Peter, you want to go first?
I think there's a lot of feeling about this topic.
Chirani, you take it. I'll pick it up.
Yes, I think if we had a cent for every time we got asked the socialization question, we'd all be living on an island with a sunny beach. Yes, actually, if you do try and socialize at school, you usually end up in detention. So school is not a place for socialization. It is actually a very artificial environment where children are put into a situation where they are with their peers for the majority of the time, and they only socialize with their peers and with children of similar socio-economic backgrounds. So when they enter the workplace, it's quite foreign for them to be with people who come from different backgrounds and are different ages. And the homeschool children actually have an advantage over here because through the course of a normal day, they interact with a variety of people. They go to the shop with mom to do grocery shopping, and they chat to the lady behind the counter, or the granny who wants to ask them why you're not in school, or they go to extramurals and they meet friends there. They go to the garage, throw in petrol, chat to the guy who's throwing in the petrol. So during the course of the day, they get the opportunity to be exposed to a whole variety of different people of different socioeconomic backgrounds. So when they finally enter the job market, it is not strange for them to communicate with these people. And in my personal experience, people often come to me after they've spoken to my teenagers and say they're totally stunned that my teenagers actually look them in the eye when they speak to them and speak to grown-ups like they're people, because they find the teenagers that come out of school are usually very evasive, don't look them in the eye, don't know how to relate to them. And I've also found that homeschool children find it very easy to relate to children who are much younger than them, and then go talk to somebody who's much older than them without, losing a step. They are really very well socialized. And another thing, that socialization is actually defined as the way that a child is brought up in a culture and is taught how to experience culture and how to see himself in this culture. And I think it's much better that a child would have a parent guiding him through this process than the peers at school, who often belittle the child, and bullying takes place. And they often lose themselves sort of finding themselves at school. So socialization for homeschoolers is definitely not an issue.
Peter, you were next in line.
Yes, you cannot embark on home education without the support of other families. And the fact that more parents are turning to home education is because this community is growing. We find more and more parents come to us, they ask us for advice. I've seen the gatherings that my wife hosts at home of youngsters coming together particularly for nature study. You cannot find a more diverse community in any of the public schools in South Africa than the homeschooling community itself. But just the sheer variety of people and age groups that come together for the purposes of learning. And also the flexibility in the schedule means that we can pursue all kinds of sports, team sports, different pursuits and interests in that bring us into contact with people from all walks of life.
I'm so glad you mentioned these things, Peter. I think one has to ask the question in the end, what is the yardstick? How do you determine whether a child is properly socialized? Because I suppose the opposite of a person that is not socialized is a person that's antisocial, or that could be one of the yardsticks that you can use. And I think if you take this issue to psychologists or experts in the field, they will tell you that regardless of whether a person was schooled in a public school, in a small school, or wherever, there's a certain rate of people that are antisocial. And there's a host of reasons why people become antisocial. And that is not necessarily got to do with what people perceive as a reason why people socialize well. And one has to go and look at practical examples. I mean, I'm a father of 4, and 3 of them are done with school. And my oldest son is a social media influencer today. He's got more than 40,000 followers on Instagram. But he was a homeschooled child. So how does that happen? How is it possible for him to be right up there with the top of his peers in South Africa, yet he was homeschooled? The question that I always have is, when people put this topic on the table, what is the yardstick? How do we determine whether a child is socialized or not? And in my humble opinion and experience, I find that socialization is an overrated issue, first of all. And whenever I deal with homeschooling people, I don't find that they are not socialized. I think they just interact far better and far more naturally across many aspects, because there's person-to-person socialization, and there's social media, etc. And it seems to me that homeschooled kids just adapt to any one of these forums with ease in their stride.
I think the question also overlooks the fact that different personalities are, or some personalities are just more sociable than others, irrespective of what circumstances you put them in. So whether it's a classroom situation or any situation, some children or some people will be more sociable, more willing to reach out to others and be outgoing than others. And, you know, that's also your yardstick, so to speak.
Yeah, some people are introverted, and often I've heard people that are introverted being labeled that they are antisocial. And yet you find introverted people in homeschooling environments, in school environments, wherever you are. That's just a characteristic of people, to be introverted or not.
Okay, I'm going to ask the next question to Shirley. What are the options for a school leaving certificate? And can home-educated learners succeed at a tertiary institution?
I'll answer the last question first, and say that they definitely do, because we've got many homeschool graduates that have achieved university degrees. There's a whole bunch that have even gone on and done honors and master's degrees. So if that's a measure of success, definitely they can. And the way they get to university is by writing a recognized school leaving certificate, just like children in school do. And there are various options. They can do the National Senior Certificate through a distance education service provider. Many of them do international, choose international options like the British Cambridge International Assessment Examinations. The American GED is another one. And some even do American high school diplomas or other alternatives. And then, of course, there's always the option of doing some or other vocational training. This you normally have to do through a college, so it's not strictly home education, but some people choose to follow that route into a career path. So homeschoolers find a way. They find a solution, and they find a way to achieve their goals and study at tertiary level.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we might have another session of burning questions, because I don't think we answered all of them. But I thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much.